Hello again, I am Blunty and it is rant time again, and the victim of the rant again is Nintendo. Now, everyone's talking about the Eurogamer article, which talks about the VentureBeat article, which talked about the Digital Foundry article about how the Nintendo Switch will be using Nvidia's Tegra X1. A last generation product based on Nvidia's Maxwell architecture, not the current generation Tegra chips based on Nvidia's current Pascal architecture. And to add insult to injury, that old and busted chip will run a lot slower than it should. And I mean a lot slower than it should. And as many of you guys will know, while once I had a great love and indeed passion for Nintendo, I have these days soured on them in a big way for many, many reasons. But I am ready to love again. I am a forgiving man, sometimes. If only Nintendo would give me a reason. So in light of this, all you regulars around here have been pinging me, wanting to know my 2 cents on this issue, so here it is. So, at the basics of this new report, which is a sleazy writer way of saying rumor or thing we heard from a guy, but you would know him, he lives in Canada. But all of this means in practice, the rough power level of the Nintendo Switch, instead of the hoped level of competitiveness with the 3-year-old PS4, the leading console we already have, would instead be somewhere in the window of an Xbox One. Maybe, when the Switch is plugged in anyway. A level of performance which has already, for the last 3 years, struggled and very often failed to run games at even 1080p, instead, more often than not, upscaling from 720p or 900p. Something that has meant the PS4 has kicked the ever-living shit out of the Xbox install base in the market, in part because of this very noticeable power gap and what it has meant for games presentation. And for the cherry on top of that disappointment, to top it off, come the reports that while unplugged in its portable mode, the Nintendo Switch massively underclocks the GPU component of the Tegra chip in order to save some battery power. Which is retarded, because if they had actually used the current generation Nvidia Pascal Tegra chips, which for a start have significantly higher performance, they wouldn't have had to cut corners on power levels so severely, as Pascal is much more power efficient by design. And this choice to use outdated hardware can be for only one reason: a misguided attempt to keep prices down so people would be more tempted to buy one. But of course it comes at the expense of long-term end-user experience. It's a trick, a ploy, a con, sleazy marketing built into the hardware level. And by the way, by massively underclock, we're talking, apparently, less than half speed, which may be okay given that the screen on it is a paltry 720p anyway, but still pretty anemic. And to top all of that off, the Switch reportedly doesn't even run the old and busted Maxwell Tegra chip at its full power in any mode. These reports say it's clocked at 768 MHz when plugged in, which is a huge drop from the 1 GHz it runs at in Nvidia's own Shield TV Android device, and when the Nintendo Switch is unplugged in its portable mode, the downclocked GPU plummets to a pathetic 370 MHz. That is barely 40% power compared to normal speed. And a pathetic 30% of the actual stock clockability of that Nvidia chip. Now, yes, I know, a wheezing low-power device, at least when compared to the competition, is nothing new to Nintendo. The Wii, the Wii U, and the 3DS were all sputtering two-stroke engines compared to the big boy toys over at Xbox and PlayStation. And it's fine for Nintendo to pretend they're not in competition with other console makers. They can self-delude all they like about how they supposedly target a different market, except they're not, and except they're making the exact same mistake they keep on making and just can't seem to learn from. What helped kill any and all potential for the Wii U, which at least on a hardware level when it launched I reviewed very highly. I liked the hardware. But of course it was choked to death by a sad and pathetically small library of games to choose from after launch. Consumers like choice. They like to know that the money they invest on a console will leave them with the option to select from a big range of choices of games. Nintendo have already shown themselves and the world very, very few people will spend money on a console, even if it's the cheapest one in the market, just to play a couple of first-party titles while they miss out on all of the other stuff the other consoles get. Third-party devs abandoned the Wii U because it is a very expensive and time-consuming effort to make a nearly entirely separate version of their game just to accommodate the Wii U's pathetic power levels compared to the main systems they were developing on. And now, devs are faced with that exact same problem again! Only this time, Nintendo have made it even worse. Now they are faced with the same Wii U problem all over again of having to dumb down their games if they want to be on the system at all, but they also have to make sure their game will run into vastly different levels of ability on the same system! So they have to dumb it down once for the Switch in TV mode to begin with, and then retard it even further to make sure it doesn't bog down to a stuttering, unusable mess in the 40% speed mode of the portable configuration. Now let's be clear, I'm not saying games can't look good and work well at this level of power. Nintendo's own endless plugging of the new Zelda game, which you could be forgiven for thinking was the only title on the system, given how much time and money Nintendo have been spending desperately pushing it into people's faces. Then you've got the new trailer for a third-party title, Seasons of Heaven. Lots of lovely scenery, some moderately fancy lighting, weird clunky animation, but you know, it looks pretty. And it runs on the popular choice Unreal Engine. So Nintendo Switch games can use modern game engines and they can look pretty. Sure, fine, okay. It's all, you know, fine. Cold hard fact, games can and will look nice on the Switch. The problem is the choice of games you'll have. With this kind of vast gap in performance yet again, Nintendo are going to have a tough time, or at least a wallet emptying time, in convincing developers to spend all the extra man-hours, money, resources that is required to retard their AAA game enough to run on the Switch in two very separate power level modes, and still somehow make it comparable enough to the PS4 version to make it even remotely tempting for consumers to choose. There is just no point in making your multi-platform game for the Nintendo Switch unless it offers a comparable experience to all players, and the Switch has a large enough user base for it to even be worth thinking about to begin with. And guess what? A large user base comes from having lots of choice. Nintendo have seemingly impossibly fallen into the same stupid arrogance that made the Wii U such a catastrophic failure in the marketplace. And yes, I'm sure with the coming announcements we'll see some AAA devs and big name titles announced for the Switch in their launch window and they're gonna look fine. But this is where I'll remind you, the Wii U's own launch lineup had big names too. Assassin's Creed 3, Batman Arkham City, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Mass Effect 3, Tekken Tag Tournament 2, Ghost Recon, Need for Speed, Battlefield, Star Wars. They were all there at launch. And how did that continue on? Here's a hint, it didn't. Out of the launch window, when devs are on their own, the Wii U plummeted into a slow, lonely death. I want the Nintendo Switch to be good. I want Nintendo to get back to being awesome instead of the lumbering, arrogant douche-mash, constantly baffled and confused old man it has turned into. Desperately trying to seem cool for the kids, but at every turn taking shitty swipes at some of its loyalist users and most passionate fans. But as more and more of the Switch gets dragged into the light of day, it's starting very much to look like Nintendo have learned sweet cock all from their monumental, biblical failures. Little would make me happier than to be entirely wrong in all of this. I would be overjoyed if in like 2 months' time, 90% of this video turns out to be a rambling diatribe of myopic buffoonery. But I don't know, guys. I have a very disheartening feeling that I won't be far off base at all here. What do you reckon? Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.